So this is a 2023 Polaris Sportsman 570 Trail Edition, and it's definitely seen some better days. So story on this one, it came from a feedlot operation where they probably have a couple thousand cows, and they buy these Sportsmans, probably 5 or 6 of them at a time and stuff, and then every 2 or 3, 4 years they kind of trade them back off. But they are incredibly rough on them. So basically, these things spend their entire life running through all the cow crap, chasing cows and stuff, and that's all they do. So this one has a few issues that we're going to address. So I bought this one to fix and sell, and hopefully we're going to make this thing look a lot better again. First of all, this thing was just absolutely packed full of mud and cow crap, which I've already washed it off, so I didn't get to show that. But this thing, like down below and stuff in here, was completely packed in around the motor and everything. It was definitely a big chore to get this thing cleaned up. So I do have the side covers for it and the seat and everything. It's complete. But right now, so this one, it does start up. Motor on it sounds fine. We do have a check engine light on, which is a code 84, which is a speed sensor, which is right there on this thing. We also have no handbrakes, nothing right there, which after a little inspection found out that there's nothing left of the brake caliper on this side, so it wore all the way through the pad and then ate up all of the disc, or all of the caliper as well. So those are a couple things that are going to get fixed on it, as well as it's definitely going to need some wheel bearings. Jacked up this four-wheeler here, and we'll show you these wheel bearings. Let's go like this. There is so much play in these things. All the wheel bearings are shot on it. Same thing on this side. Even the rears are bad. That much play all the way around on this thing. So the one thing I find with some of these four-wheelers that are especially on feedlot machines is the cow crap and everything is just, it's acidic, it just tears things up. I feel like it just wears the machines away so much faster. It's kind of weird on these plastics, which these are painted plastics from Polaris, and they've been running these for a while, and for some odd reason they had two of them that were both red, and there must have been some sort of weird defect in the paint, because paint just flaked off on both of these two, which I've never actually seen that before. Usually the paint's really robust on these. So I think the first thing we're going to tackle is pull this front wheel off. We'll see about this caliper, get some wheel bearings going, get that speed sensor switched, see what other issues we come up with as we go. So here's that caliper. It wore all the way through that outer brake pad and then basically disintegrated the caliper itself. That much play in the bearings. Got real loose tie rods as well up underneath here. U-joints are shot on it, so I'll have to replace those as well. But yeah, I think first we'll get this caliper off here and see if I got a replacement on hand. So I figured out exactly what destroyed this caliper here. What happened was I took this hub off here to start replacing some wheel bearings. Found out that this was completely broken inside there. So basically it was being held on by the CV shaft spline there. But yeah, that's what really destroyed that caliper, is it was wobbling like that. But here's the bearing that's out of it. Got these replaced already, but you can see the remainder of the hub is still in there. And it sounds like there's a prize inside this bearing. So we've got wheel bearings replaced on both front sides. We still need to do some wheel bearings on the rear. Also haven't touched these U-joints yet, so that's still on the project list. Another thing, this Sportsman had just a ton of play in the steering, which I'll show you what's going on there. So this spline right there, so that's coming out of the power steering unit and then going down into basically the tie rod part. You can see here, if I wiggle the steering there, there's a bunch of play in that bottom end of that tie rod system. Basically, the splines on these things will just get kind of rusted out and everything, and it just kind of creates a lot of slop. So our solution is, get to focus here, so I've already done this, is I started to drill a hole all the way through there, right there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to push a roll pin through there, and that'll eliminate all of that slop and play in this thing. Well, we're working on the rear bearings on this thing right now. So this side we've got off. We've got a new one in there. The old ones came out in pieces like they typically do. The race is still stuck on the hub. We'll have to cut that off. It kind of sucks. But we got a new bearing pressed in this one. The way these things kind of disassemble is you got bolt on the top side and bottom side, and then the biggest thing that's kind of a pain is these little bushings right here push into the side of that hub or that upright. So sometimes, especially on this one, since everything seems to be stuck on this from all the cow crap and stuff, these were really kind of stuck in there, so they took a lot of work to kind of wedge themselves out and free up. And just like every other problem on this four-wheeler, on the other side over here, similar issues. So here's that upright hub is still stuck in the bearing. We're currently kind of pushing this out from the back side to get that hub released from the bearing, and then we'll press this bearing out and put a new one in there as well. We'll keep plugging away at this thing. So the hub I've got pressed back out. It was stuck down in here. Naturally, when it came back out, the races were stuck onto the hub right there. All the balls fell out of the bearing as well. So we're gonna have to cut this off. Usually what I use is a Dremel with a little cutoff disc. Slice this and get a punch on there and pop these off. There's really no way to get from the back side and kind of like press this inner race off. We'll get that cut off and then get this bearing pressed out and put a new bearing in it. I have the rear wheels all put back together. I got the bearings and hubs pushed back in. Rear tires back on it. Working back on this front here. Got a new hub here. Not a broken one, unlike my old one, which is broken. When we pull this apart, the threads on this ball joint were basically like sheared off and stuff, and the nut wouldn't come off, so we ended up having to cut this off. So I've actually got a new whole tie rod with joints and stuff, so I'm gonna assemble that. We're gonna put that on. We'll put this hub back on there, put a new brake caliper on there as well, and this front will be done. And then I just need to tackle the U-joints on this prop shaft. Now that we've got the new caliper on, we need to bleed these brakes. So on these, there's a little bleeder screw on the back side with our front brakes. Our master cylinder's right up there, so we'll add some brake fluid to that, start pumping this thing through and get all the air out of this system. Then we should have some front brakes again on this thing. So something I always like to do when I'm bleeding these brakes, the first thing I do is I've cracked open the bleeder down at the caliper down there and left it open, and we're just pumping fluid through. So I do this to start getting that fluid going, working most of the air out, and then I'll go down there and crack and open and pump this all in a nice sequence. Easy way to do this with one person is get these brakes, pull the brake, set the park brake on here, then you can go down, crack open the bleeder, shut it, and then keep working the brakes so you're not sucking air back in down at the caliper side. In order to get these U-joints replaced, we need to take this prop shaft out. Normally the way to do this is there's a pin right there, you press that out, and then this whole shaft will slide backwards on this spline shaft here. It'll give you enough room to wiggle this prop shaft out to the side. I've worked on a couple of these from this farm in the past, and these always seize right here. I'm kind of doubting this is going to come out easy, so I'm probably going to have to end up replacing these U-joints basically in place here. But we'll try to get it out the normal way because it makes replacing the U-joints a lot easier. But I doubt it. So we're going to see what happens here. Well, this shaft is not budging at all, so we're going to have to replace these U-joints inside the frame like this. These U-joints are just completely shot though. You can see just how much play is in these things. It's just worn all the way through everything. It's even starting to rub on the, right there, you can see the wear on the yoke itself. But to get these out, we're going to pull that snap ring out and then start punching these joints out. All right, what I'm doing now, I've got all the snap rings removed. I'm taking my punch, driving out that cup, and what that's doing is pushing out the back side. So I'm going to push this far enough out where I can just grab with a vice grip and pop that cup off, drive it back the other way, and then pull this cup off, and do that for all of the joints to get the old joint out. If they come out in pieces, that's even better yet. I've got the other side pressed out far enough I can get my big vice grip on here. So we'll wiggle this guy kind of back and forth and break that cup loose. Should be able to shimmy it out and then do the same on the other side. All right, there's one of the old caps. So that's the process. Now we'll drive that yoke back the other way, the joint back the other way, and push the other cap back out. So I've done the same process to the front joint. I've left the yoke that's attached to the front diff on there. Now this shaft is free. Okay, so it'll be easier to do this in a vise to pull these other joints off. So we'll pop these out quick and then we'll start pressing in some new ones. Here's a little better view of how bad these U-joints really were. Like I said, that's all wear from the two yokes rubbing on each other. Yeah, this thing's only a year old, but running in nothing but cow crap just eats stuff up. Got the other joints all pressed out of my shaft. I'm going to start assembling this side first to get it halfway done, and then we'll put it back into the frame there. But so these are the part numbers if you want to cross-reference to any Napa or O'Reilly's or whatever. But 72138 is the joint for the newer 570s, as well as like the 850s and 550s, where the snap rings are on the outside of the yoke. The older style U-joint is a 338 U-joint, which you can find those at any of the auto parts stores as well, if you're in a bind and don't want to wait and order one. But yeah, we're going to assemble these first, and then we'll throw it back into the frame. I've got this one started here. I like to use a C-clamp to press these in. You don't want to hit on these with a hammer or anything, because the little needle bearings down inside there will fall down and they'll get stuck down in the bottom, and then when you try to press it all the way together, you run out of clearance. So we'll press this in slowly with the C-clamp and then put our snap rings back in and then put this back together. I've got this shaft wiggled back in place here, so now all that's left is to put our caps on this part of the joint, on the front and the rear. It's a little more challenging. You can just barely sneak the C-clamp back in back here to kind of squeeze these back together. I also like to lube them up really good with some WD-40 or something before you slide those caps on. But yeah, let's do that and then we'll be done. All right, I've got all the front end stuff, the wheels and the bearings all put back together, but we've still got a check engine light going on with this thing, which was the speed sensor, which is right there. So I'm going to put a new one of those in quick, and hopefully that'll fix my check engine light, and then we should be able to just put this thing all back together and we're done. All right, it is all done and back together. Everything's working the way it's supposed to. Let's replace all four wheel bearings, front prop shafts, fixed all the front brake issues and that broken front hub, fixed the check engine light, which ended up just being that speed sensor, and then just did a service and stuff on it too. So fortunately couldn't really do much about the plastics with that chipped off paint and stuff, but we'll find a new home for this thing, so follow along to the next one.